How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Strikeout Bros. This is episode 9. This is going to be a special edition episode, and we're going to be talking about how we feel that the MLB season is way too long, and we have proposals today. Lasha's going to have one. What's going on, Lasha? How you doing?
What's going on, man?
And I have one, and we're going to figure out whose proposal, is a little better and our thoughts on each other's proposals based on the season being too long and how we're gonna make it more exciting and shorter to keep people's attention spans going. It's gonna be an interesting episode. It's gonna be fun to talk about opinions, and what we think. And the funny thing about this is that we both wrote up these proposals and we didn't, you know, talk to each other about what we were thinking. So it's gonna be news to me, news to him. So it's gonna be super interesting in that way. And we just wanna, before we start, we wanna talk about how me and Lasha met. And it's a very interesting story. We met in New York, and we both work in the medical field. And when I first met Lasha, I thought he was an interesting cat. And we both figured out right away that we were into baseball. And he's a closet Met fan, but he grew up as a Baltimore Oriole fan. I believe his dad is a Yankee fan, but we'll discuss that a little later. And yeah, I grew up as a Met fan in the Bronx. My dad is a diehard Met fan. He came down from Puerto Rico in the early 70s, and found work. And he lived in the Bronx, but for some odd reason, I don't know, he was fascinated by the Mets, and he followed them and went to games. And he turned me into a Met fan. You know how it is. The apple never falls far from the tree. And I grew up in the South Bronx, maybe 10 minutes away from Yankee Stadium. And the funny thing is that I was pretty much the only kid on the block wearing a orange and blue jersey. So it was hard growing up, because the Yankees always dominated, especially in the 90s when I was a teenager and I was able to, really see what was happening out there in the streets, especially in the South Bronx. But Lasha's a diehard Baltimore Oriole fan, and Lasha ended up moving to Atlanta, still in the medical field, and we're like brothers. We've known each other for over a decade now, and me and Lasha always stay in touch, and we would have these amazing long conversations on the phone about baseball, especially after he left. It was all over the phone because obviously he was in Atlanta, I was in New York, and we were going into these long ass phone conversations, longer than anybody else I talk to. I don't talk to anybody on the phone for over an hour, but with Lasha, it was really easy to, talk and figure out what was going on in his life and vice versa, because we were brothers, and we're still brothers. And it's always fun talking to him over the phone about baseball. We get into these really long rants, and one day Lasha said, "Damn, bro, we should start a podcast. This is very interesting." And every time we would get off the phone, we'd be like, "Wow, that was a really good podcast," and hang up, right? So eventually, he said, "It's time, Pablo." And I said, "You know what? You're right." So we went out, we bought some equipment, and we decided that we wanted to, spread our word and, you know, talk about baseball on the radio, on the waves. It's kind of funny. I love the story, and we're building. This is a work in progress. We both had no idea how much work putting a podcast together was, and we did a little bit of research, and we tried our best to make it happen. Like I said, it's a work in progress, and hopefully you guys are enjoying the show, episode 9. And we're moving forward, and I hope that you guys feel that the podcast is growing after every episode. I thank all the fans out there that have been tuning in on a weekly basis, and I think we've come a long way. What are your thoughts on that, Lash?
Yeah, man, it's crazy. So I've known you for about 9 years now. We worked at a company in Brooklyn and called Transcare EMS. They no longer exist. It's a non-emergency transport company, and they also did 911. But anyway, Pablo and I didn't have partners at the time. So the way it works, if for those of you who don't work on ambulance, you get partnered with another person. And so Pablo and I we were partnered together one day, and when I first met Pablo, Pablo's a very quiet, reserved individual. He had his big North Face coat on. He's got his Beats headphones over his head. He didn't want to talk to nobody. He just is in his zone, and I was cool with it. I'm one of those people. If you talk, great. If you don't, I don't care. I can drive and do my job. And one day it was like middle of spring, and the Mets were playing a game, and I remember you asked me, "Hey, Lodge, you mind if we put on the ball game?" I said, "Yeah, of course, man. I love baseball." So we turned on the Mets game, and we were having a blast, and we were listening to the game. I think we even listened to the game with the patients in the back, but we had a blast, and we became. That's how we got connected and found a liking to baseball. But so the way I became an Orioles fan is my family's from Virginia, and the first game I ever went to was at Camden Yards in Baltimore. This is probably like 99 maybe, or maybe 2000. I went to a game, and at the time the Nationals didn't exist. My family, I came from a large family. We didn't have a lot of money, so going to a ball game was like a dream. My grandmother, God rest her soul, she bought us tickets and allowed our whole family to go. We had a whole weekend at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and that's how I became a fan. And they always say the way most kids become a fan is through the first experience. I'm sure you remember your first game, whether it be with your dad,
Yeah, it was
or,
definitely with my dad.
and that's how you usually fell in love with the team. Now, growing up, we didn't have cable TV, and I had a radio, but I didn't start listening to radio until my family. We moved from Virginia to New Jersey, and we didn't have cable TV, and I like to listen to baseball, and so my dad and I, dad would put on the Yankees games because he's a big Yankee fan, and we would listen to the game. We didn't have cable TV, and I love listening to the game on the radio because it's something you can listen to in the car. We drive to the store together, or dad would have me mow the lawn and put on the game, or if my dad was prepping dinner in the backyard on a barbecue, he'd say, "Hey, Lash, go get the radio. Let's put on the game." I said, "Okay, Dad, sounds good." And we have our bonding moments, and ever since, that's how I fell in love with baseball, and it's pretty amazing. But as far as Baltimore goes, it's been a for both of our teams. Both of our teams have not been good. I think my team, the last time they were like really good was probably like late 90s, 91, 93. I think like they were really good. And the Mets, the last time they were in the World Series prior to 2015 was what, 70,
2000 against
2000?
the
Yeah,
Yankees.
2000. I forgot about that Subway Series. So we've hit a lot of bumps and hills and good times and bad times, mostly bad times for both of our teams. A lot of misery, a lot of 100+ loss seasons, and we talk on the phone like this guy stinks, this guy's trade this guy, trade that guy. I want a new owner, and here we are, 9 years later, together, and for the first time in the years that we've known each other, we both have two new owners. The Mets have a new owner, and so do the Orioles. I don't know, and the Orioles ownership just got bought out this year. It's a combination of Cal Ripken and some other multi-billionaires. And the Mets got bought out by a big Mets
Stephen
fan,
Cohen.
Steve
Stephen
Cohen.
Cohen. Yeah.
And the one thing our both of our teams had in common is that we had cheap owners. They don't buy, they don't spend the money to get the players, and they had no way how to develop a farm system like the Yankees did, and all these other teams. Or Yankees necessarily didn't develop a farm system; they just brought the best players that were available, like the A-Rods of the world, the Roger Clemens, David Justice from the Braves, and all these guys Tino Martinez from Seattle, where the Mets were just kind of like getting small pieces. They finally got a superstar in David Wright. That took a while. I remember the great days of Carlos
Yeah.
Delgado. I remember Mo Vaughn,
Jose
Jose
Reyes.
Reyes,
Exactly. We
uh,
had a good run in those years.
Edgar
We did good.
Renteria. Who else? Octavio. Yeah,
I remember, being a young Mets fan, or even going further back, like the 1986 Mets. I was in Marford. I was 10, and I remember that team. My favorite player of all time is Gary Carter, man. He rest in peace. And I always thought,
he's a great catcher.
he was a great catcher. Not only was he a great catcher, he was a great leader. All right, and he hit the ball really well. He was a presence. And I'll always remember him as a kid. I always remember going out and saying Gary Carter's up to bat. As I was coming up to the plate. And yeah, he was the type of player that kids want to wear his jersey and be him. When we're kids, you pretend to be one of these big stars, and he always stood out to me. I loved him as a player. When he came over from the Expos, who are now the Washington Nationals, he was electric. He came over, and he was a veteran player, and he was able to make the team better. He was one of those guys that could make your team way better than it was. And we had Keith Hernandez. He came over from St. Louis, and he had a lot of experience. And then we had the young guys like Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry. And I remember those days. I remember, being a proud Mets fan in the South Bronx. I didn't care what the other kids were saying. I was a Met fan, and I was a diehard. My dad said, "You're a Met fan," and that's what I became. And here we are. And it's funny because at this point in time in MLB, I feel like we're both really close to a championship. I think Baltimore's way closer because it took them longer. They were able to develop a lot of players. They have a nice squad over there, and I like what I see. And hopefully that happens in Queens too. But today's episode is going to be interesting. Like I said, we're going to be talking about whether or not the season is too long, and we both have proposals, and let's see how it goes, Lasha. So let me explain something to you. Right, from 1876 to 1960, the schedule, it changed multiple times, right, from as low as 60 games to as high as 154. But then in 1961, that's when it changed over to 162. And that's what we have now, right? And it's been the case ever since, right? Except for the COVID season. I believe that was a 60-game season, but that was due to, the pandemic. But for the majority of it, since 61, it's been 162 games. Now, we're going to have Lasha go first, and he's going to tell us why the season is too long and what his proposal is to make it more exciting. And you're up to bat, buddy. You're up to bat.
Yeah, so currently, as you know, we play 162 games in the season. That's a lot of games. Um, in the A lot of teams usually in the first months, a quarter of the teams in the majors are already out of the playoffs by the end of the first month, which is kind of sad. So I always wondered why they play so many games, besides the point of money, because obviously every game you have, you sell tickets. The more tickets you sell, the more food you can sell. So it's a cash cow essentially
Oh,
by
yeah.
having those games. Where other sports you have less games, like football, you have less games, but the prices to go to a ball game, the prices to go to an NFL game are like double what they are compared to a baseball game. I could go buy $15 seats to go to see the Mets right now if I wanted to, no problem. Where if I want to go see the Giants or Jets play in New York, got me spending at least $60 minimum, probably for just
Yeah.
to go see a game and freeze my butt off and deal with the inclement weather.
Yeah,
But
but a lot.
whereas,
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot more people are tuning in though because it's a once a week affair, you know, and a lot of people make it their business to make sure they're off on that Sunday, and they get together, and it's more of a family thing than anything else, because it's like it's Sunday, my team is playing, let's go to the game, let's watch the game on the big screen, let's have a cookout. It's a different type of affair, it's important to watch these games. There's only 17 games in a season, versus 162 games. I'm not saying the season should be 17 games, but we need to, dwindle the numbers down a little to make it a little bit more exciting. That's just my opinion. But continue, Lash.
yeah. So currently it used to be that you would play your division rivals 19 times. Well, now they dropped it down to 13 times because they want to uh, make it so that you would play the interleague division teams more often. Whereas in the early 2000s, what they would do is for example, if you're a Mets fan and majority of your first half of the season, you would play all the NL teams first, and then when you got into like July after the 4th of July weekend, they had what you call the interleague series games. So the first interleague series games was Mets versus Yankees, you Chicago
Yeah,
Cubs and Chicago White
White
Sox, LA
Sox.
Angels, LA Dodgers, Texas
Yes.
Rangers, so on and so on. So the only time you saw your National League team was in the summertime, midsummer, but it was only for like maybe like 2 weeks at best. Now they change it, so now you play the international teams any time of the year. It doesn't matter if it's the second half or first half. I kind of like the old school way because it makes it more exciting because, back then it was really, the rivalry was strong. We're like, yeah, we're going to play the Yankees. If you're a Mets fan, yeah, it's been a long time. Now we can
Yeah.
compare how we're doing because, the Mets always look down as the little brother to the Yankees and so on. So you always want to compare yourself. Wow, we took 2 out of 3 from the Yankees in the midsummer. By then the Yankees already probably in first place
Yeah.
in the division. The Mets are either fighting for a wild card or not even in it. So it was always fun, and the rivalries was always renewed when you had crosstown interlocking crosstown rival games. But now they just combine all the games, and you just 1 week you'll play the Pirates, and next week you're back to playing the Philadelphia Phillies, so on and so on. So there's no longer really much of a rival. But they realize, I think baseball realized that, hey, we can get more money. You can get small market teams playing against big market teams in the early season.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think that's why they did it. You can go have Kansas City go play the Dodgers in L.A. or you can have the Dodgers come to Kansas City and they create revenue because a team like the Dodgers comes to a small market team like Kansas City. That's going to create some revenue for the fans
Well,
or for the
definitely.
organization.
But yeah, for sure.
That's probably one of the reasons
Yeah.
why they did it.
Imagine, you have Otani coming to, to any park. You're gonna see an influx of Otani fans coming to the ballpark. It's fun. It's fun and it's interesting. It makes the game exciting. Because now at this point, you have to play every single team in the league. So this is how they're doing it now. But it's still too many games, in my opinion. But go ahead. Why don't you start off with your proposal and tell us how many games you're interested in seeing and how you're gonna break it up.
So my theory was this: you would knock off 48 games, so you go from 162 games to 114 games.
Mm,
You'd play your division opponents 24 times total. What
wow.
that means is you'd play basically 6 games against each team in your division. So, for example, the Mets would play the Atlanta Braves 6 times. So, the first half of the season, you play your first 3 games in Atlanta, and the second half of the season, you towards the end of the season, you play the Mets again back in New York. So you split up the reason why you would do that because the first half of the year maybe the team was hot. Now in the second half of the year maybe the team has kind of gone down, so it's not as good as they were. So it makes it more interesting. Also, the reason for that is for if it's a divisional race between 2 teams in the division who are fighting for that first spot in the division, then now you have the head to head, and it can determine who wins that division based on the last couple of games of the year
Mm,
against your division.
I like
So
that.
24 games, 6 games total, 3 away, 3 at home,
Okay.
and then the rest of the way, what I would do is I would play all the other teams since you have 6 divisions, but obviously you'd be playing against 5 other divisions. So against those 5 other divisions, you play each one of those teams 3 times. So in total, you play the AL West. AL East would play the AL West 15 times total. The AL East would play the NL East 15 times total. Basically, uh, 3 games total. So the Braves would play the Mets. Excuse me. The Braves would play the Yankees 3 times, and that's it. Every other year, you rotate where they play. So this year they play in the Bronx. Next year they play in Atlanta, and so on and so on.
Mm.
So you have 24 games against your either NL East team or your AL East team, and then you have 90 games remaining against other non-divisional opponents,
I like it.
and that would leave you to 114 games. And then my solution would be to start the season in May, because in April and March you get a lot of the rain outs, you get a lot of cancellations. So to avoid those games getting canceled and rescheduled, let's start the season in mid-May, and it could still go into September, and you'd still be done by October, hopefully. My other solution is that you get rid of the wild cards. No wild cards currently right now in the playoffs. It's a 10-team race, I believe. Correct? 10 teams
Uh,
make the playoffs.
yes, two wild cards and the three divisional winners. Yeah, you're correct.
So
It's
10.
five on five. Yeah,
So what I would do is I make it a 12-team playoffs, and the top two teams from each division make it no matter what, unless the second team in your division has an under 500 record. With that, then you would pick the third best team in the other division, whoever has a 500 record. So what that means was, for example, in the NL East, let's just say, going off our current schedule, the Philadelphia Phillies and the Atlanta Braves are first and second in the
yes,
NL East currently. So what that means, both the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies would make the playoffs. In the AL East, you'd have the Yankees and the Orioles make the playoffs. In the NL West, you would have the the LA Dodgers and the San Diego Padres make the playoffs as currently constituted. In the Central, you'd have the Milwaukee Brewers and the Chicago Cubs, and so on and so on.
and that's 12
So
teams. Got you.
that's 12 teams,
That's 12
no
teams.
5-game series, 12. You'd have all the games would be 7-game series, no 12, no 5-game series, ALCS, no 5 games ALDS or wild card. Well, the ALDS is five games. Now you make it 7.
Got you.
And then as far as rankings go, I would rank them. So, for example, I take the NL division, right? And whoever has the best record for for that National League team. So, if the best record right now, currently speaking, in the NL, in the whole National League, is the Philadelphia Phillies, right? So they would get the number 1 seed. And what I would do is the 2 number 1 seeds, one from the NL and one from the AL, they get to pick who they would want to play.
That's
And
super interesting. So you're
yes,
allowing the number one seed to pick their opponent. That's
but you have to be
crazy.
the number 1 seed in the whole division. You have to be the number 1 seed
In the
in the
whole league.
whole National League,
In the whole league.
in the whole league.
Wow.
So I have to be your best team in the National League, and I have to either be the best team in the American League, not the best team in the NL East or the AL East, and so on.
Wow.
So, for example, the best team in the National League is the Phillies, and the best team in the American League is currently the Yankees. So the Yankees and the Phillies would get to choose who they would play in the first round matchup. Now, the
Wow.
way you go down through, how do you go from 2 through so on? So after that, you go based on record. So who has the second best record in the NL? So the second best record in the NL would be the Dodgers. So they would get the 2 seed. 3 seed would be Atlanta. 4 seed would be Milwaukee, and then so on and so on. You know what I mean?
I got you. It's interesting. It's a different way of looking at it. It's funny how, we're definitely, like I said, we didn't speak on what our proposals were to keep it interesting for the show. And we have similar ideas, right? But then they branch off. It's like a lot of forks in the road. But the foundation of what you were thinking and the foundation of what I was thinking is pretty similar. But continue, please. Very interesting. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So you go based on that, um, and then you would have advanced, and whoever completed the year with the best record in the league. For example, if the Philadelphia Phillies finished with the best record in the National League, would get home field advantage all the way through up to the World Series, because the home field advantage would still be determined by whoever won the All-Star game That's how I would do
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, you still like that, huh?
Yep. So I
You
would
still
do
like
that
that.
because you got to make the All Star game a reason to watch.
I
You got to make
understand
it
that.
something
I
exciting.
understand that.
So, for example, if the Philadelphia Phillies are the number one seed in the National League, all the games all the way up to the World Series would be at home. So they would get Game 7 at home all the way through
Got you. So they get game one
until the
and they
World
get game
Series.
7.
1-7. And same
But
thing with Yankees. If the Yankees are the number one team in the American League, they get first game. All the games leading up to the World Series would be games 1-7 would be at home. And also, what I would also go back to, I go back to the 2-3-2 because before right now it's 2-2, 1-1. It's just chaotic.
yes, I don't
So
like
what
that either.
I don't like either. So what you do is you play your first two games at the that team, the higher seed, and you play the three straight home games at the lower seed,
Hmm.
and then you come back to the number one seed or whoever
Yeah,
has the higher seed back home.
I was always a fan of that. I love the 2-3-2. It made sense. So the home field advantage gets 4 games, and the opposing team gets 3. But they get those 3 in the middle. So this way, it's less chaotic, less traveling. I like that. I totally
Yeah,
like
less
that.
traveling is a key thing because, for example, right, if if the Yankees are going to play the Dodgers in the World Series, going to the West Coast to do that in a 2 days in a 1 day span and then to play a game, that's a lot.
It's a
So
lot, even with the one day of rest that they get, because these playoff games. Let's say they play on a Tuesday, then they're not playing again until Thursday. So they get that day in
exactly,
between, but at the same time, it's kind of crazy. I'd rather have 3 straight games at the opposing team, the lower seeds home, right, and let them play them straight out, right. So you get a rest in between, going from stadium to stadium, and then you play straight out. I think it's more exciting, and it keeps the fans going.
and then the other solution I had, right, to avoid teams tanking on purpose to get the number one draft pick. Right now, it's a lottery system. So what I would do is I would take I would have like a mini tournament at the end of the year for the two worst teams, right? And you say, all right, these are the two worst teams in the majors, and you're going to play a 3 game series, and
Mhm.
whoever wins gets the number one pick in the draft. So even
Interesting.
if the Mets had the worst pick, the worst record in the majors, and the Orioles had the second worst record to complete the season, they would play each other at the end of the season, and then because you know how there's a couple days off before the playoffs start,
Uh huh.
so you start right away, 3 game series, and whoever wins gets the number one seed in the draft.
Hmm.
So now what happens is it's less likely that you tank because if you have the worst record, you're guaranteed to get the number
The
one
best
spot.
seed. Yeah.
That's why Baltimore is good now because they tanked for several years. They got the number one pick. But if you do it this way, it's not guaranteed that you're gonna get the first pick because now you gotta duke it out on the field and you gotta win it. You know.
Wow.
So
Wow.
for example, right? You know, Baltimore might have the worst record, right? But the second team has the second worst record, might have 10 games, 10 more wins than the Orioles, right?
Yeah. Understandable. I got you.
So that team has 10 more wins than the Orioles, they could beat the Orioles in 3 game series. Now they get the first pick. So
Let's
it's a way
see.
to avoid tanking and people trying to. And then after that, the draft falls as is. So you'd have Baltimore, Atlanta, and so on. In order of the draft.
I got you. But it still doesn't, stop the tanking in a sense, right? Because they can tank all year, right? And then they have to get to this position where they have to battle for that number one draft pick, right? So they can tank all year, but at the end of the year, they still have to fight for the number one pick, which is
So I had a
interesting.
solution to that. So here's what I would also do. If it is deemed that you are caught, if it is known that you are on purposely tanking for the season, as you know in baseball, it's shared revenue, right? So each team gets a certain percentage of the revenues that each team generates. Whatever the Mets generated for that year, the Braves get some of that revenue, and vice versa. So what I would do if a team is found to purposely tank, any revenue that they create for the next season, all that they lose all their revenues for that year, and it gets distributed out to the rest of the teams.
Oh my God, that sounds
So
horrible.
now, so now it makes it harder because now you're not going to be able to get the free agents because you lost all that revenue because you tanked on purpose. So money, money talks, and nonsense walks. You know what I mean? So it, there's a price to pay. So now on my own, not only am I losing the first pick in the draft, I'm also going to lose money. So if you're a small market team like the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Kansas City Royals, that's you lose all that money. You're not going to be able to sign anybody. And if you have a free agent that you want, if one of your own players is a star, and you want, like for example, if Bobby Witt Jr. on the Royals is a free agent, and they're predicting that at the end of the year they want to sign him, now they might not be able to re-sign him because they don't have the money because they lost that money because all that money got distributed for losing on purpose. So there has to be a penalty for losing, and that penalty was you lose all revenue earnings. So and also what that also means is you don't get any revenue back from the other teams either. You know what I mean?
Damn,
So you get
severe
nothing.
punishment.
Yeah,
Severe punishment.
yeah. I think that's a
Yeah,
great idea, money, because and I think you have it more competitive. Also, that's why I like the idea of reducing the games because now you have teams that are lasting longer, and
yes.
as the season goes, the
It's a
division
short
race is going to
run.
be tighter. So
Yes.
every game is going to matter. You're really going to try.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with that. I totally do. I mean, that sounds super interesting, Lasha. Like you came up with a completely different way, and not only did you come up with a different way, you were able to stop the nonsense around the league as well. Like you said, the tanking and the revenue sharing and all that. You were able to, find a way to get around that as well. That's interesting. That's some real smart thinking. But now I'm gonna give you my
So
proposal. My proposal is gonna be 99 games, right? You went with 114. I went 99, and 99 games includes right two 3-game series against your division, right? So that means if you're the Mets, you're playing a 3-game series at home against Atlanta, and then you have to go to Truist Park and play a 3-game series over there, right? And then after that, you play every other team in the whole league in a 3-game series. That equals 99. All right. So you get, and to, go a little further, the 3-game series against everybody else in the league, we're going to alternate the stadiums every other year. All right. So, for example, if Casey comes to City Field to play a series against the Mets this year, then next year we're going to the Royals, and we're gonna play a series over there. So there'll be no, oh, but we played at their home and we didn't get to play in our home. No, next year it's gonna happen over there. So don't worry about it. So 99 games, 3-game series against everyone in your division, and then you're gonna have a 3-game series against everybody else in the league. All right. So I don't like the wild card either. So the top team from every division is gonna get to go into the playoffs, right? And the fourth team is gonna be based on record. So the best record after the 3 divisional winners is gonna go into the playoffs as well. So that's gonna create an 18 playoff, right? So those games, they're all gonna be best of 7. Okay, so it eliminates the wild card series. It eliminates all that nonsense to me, because I don't feel like a team that won 70 games should be competing in the playoffs. So by making the season shorter, teams that aren't able to compete in the long run can maybe have a good run and stay afloat. Okay, so 99 games. This is what I'm proposing. Get it to the playoffs. It's a best of 7. Now, I agree with you when it comes to the season starting in May. This way, all the teams on the East Coast, don't have to worry about the cold conditions. They don't have to worry about rain. They don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You start the season in May, and then you work it out that way. And now this is where it gets interesting. This is my proposal, right? So instead of having a spring training period, right? I want to do a tournament, and I want it to be similar to like the World Baseball Classic, right? So now, these guys are coming to spring training, and they want to focus on their dynamics, and they want to focus on their you know their development, right? They want to develop these players. They want to make sure that they're ready for the season. So this is a perfect way to do it by competing, you know. So you're gonna keep the same structure, right? It's gonna be the same divisions, right? But you have to play 3 games with everyone in your division, right? And then after you're done with that, the team with the best record is automatically going into the playoffs, right? And then once again, no wild card. So the fourth best team that we need to create a playoff situation is going to be the team with the best record. Now, if there's multiple teams, right, that have the same record to try to qualify for that fourth slot, then we're going to go into team average. Okay. So let's happen to say that, you know, okay, the Mets make it in the National League East, and then Chicago makes it, and then the Dodgers make it, right? So now the fourth best record is going to be based on wins, right? But if those two teams have the same record, right, and they're qualifying into the playoffs, we're going to look at team average, and that team average is going to decide whether or not you go into the playoffs. So it's going to be short and sweet, you know, because you're playing 3 games against everybody in the division, right? So that tallies up to 12 games. So whoever has the best record in each division is going to the semifinal. And then the fourth team is coming out of a best record situation. And if they're tied, we look at average, team average, right? Now, those games in the semifinal will be a 3 out of 5. And then we go from there. And when we do the final, which is going to be American versus National, it'll be a best of 7. And whoever wins that is going to have a trophy, obviously, and home field advantage in the World Series. So, like you said, you were worried about, you know, the All-Star game not being important. Well, let's make it fun for the fans. Let's make it a situation where they come to see all the stars go out and play a game of baseball and they can have fun. But we can't make that game exciting because these guys never take the game seriously. You know, it's all fun and laughter and all that. But this little tournament is going to change things. It's going to make them want to play hard because it's going to create home field advantage for their league, right? Now, all the teams that get eliminated after that, they go back to their camps and they can play inter-squad games until the season starts. And this is my solution to making the season a lot more interesting and shorter and fun to watch.
No, I definitely like it. The thing I like about it is that even if you have, even if you're tied in the division with the same best, let's say the Mets and the Phillies are the same records, and they're both well above 500. One of those two teams could not make the playoffs, might not make the playoffs, even they have a good record, just because one team is batting 350 and the other team is batting 352. So it makes it very, very interesting. I kind of
Yeah,
like that idea.
thank you, thank you. You know, I thought about it. I was trying to make it interesting. I think that spring training is too long. You know, they play like close to 30 games during spring training, but nobody's really watching that stuff now. You created a tournament around it, people would really tune in. You know, so not only does that bring revenue to the owners, and it compensates for the shorter season, it makes it fun for the fans. You know.
And that's what it's about. You want, because baseball, they're saying, is a dying sport. It's so hard. Football is the king of the world in this country, and you got, baseball is one of the sports where you got, football. There's constant action all the time. Baseball, there's not. So it's about keeping people's attention. How can you keep people engaged in the game? How can you get people engaged in the season? Currently, where it is, if you're a team like the Cincinnati Reds, or somebody that's not doing well, it's like, why am I even gonna bother watch the season? I already know how the outcome. Or the Chicago White Sox, perfect example. They have the worst record in the majors. I guarantee, if I was a fan, because I used to be like this, I'd stop watching. Like, I'd stop caring. Like, I'm never gonna make the effort to watch my team play. If I'm already 12 plus games under 500 and it's the end of May, it's
Yeah.
just not even worth it.
Yeah. Season's over. Exactly.
Exactly.
Season's over for your team. So why are you tuning in? Prior to the putting this podcast together with you, it was funny. Like I wasn't watching other teams play. I didn't care for them, you know. I watched what was in front of me, you know. So if the Mets were
It's a
playing the
very regional
Phillies,
sport, baseball. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So I would watch the divisional games. I would watch what's in front of me. Whoever the Mets were playing, that's who I was watching. Now, you know, um, all over the place. I'm watching Pittsburgh. I'm watching all types of different teams play, and it's fun because I wanna, I want the knowledge. I wanna learn. I wanna see what's going on around the league. I wanna see these prospects coming up. You know, before I didn't know what was going on. So, for example, on the last episode, we just finished talking about Paul Skeens, right? And we talked about how electric he is. I would have never known about that a year ago because I wouldn't be in tune. You know, so it's interesting. I think that your proposal was great. I love my proposal, you know, because of course I put it together. But that's besides the point, you know. I think that we both had very great points, and I believe that we made the game of baseball a lot more interesting, you know, with these proposals. But they're never gonna listen to us, obviously, because it's all about money and generating money. And imagine, I just cut the season short by 63 games. You know how much money we're talking about? You know how much hot dog money we're talking about? You know how much beer money we're talking about? You know how many tickets we're talking about?
Nacho hats. You know those
Not,
big hats they
yeah,
give you with the and they put the
of course,
nachos and it's
of
like
course. You know how
20 or
much
the
money?
New York so at Yankee Stadium they have those fried chicken buckets. It's like a pound of fries and then maybe it's like 12 tenders, but it's like $25. I'm sure they have that at City Field. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's
How
crazy.
so if you're gonna shorten the season, guess what? There's a price to pay for the fans. They're gonna have to increase the
Yeah,
cost of the food in the stadium and the prices to go to these games. Now, problem is if you do that, are you gonna get more people showing up to the games?
I think so. I
Especially
think it'll fill up the stadium a
if
lot
it's a
more
good
if it's
team,
less
yes.
games and it's less games.
It's
So
less games. If it's good teams, yeah. But if you're a team like Kansas City Royals or the Miami Marlins or the White Sox, no one's gonna go out to go. Like, hey, what are you doing today? You want to go to Chicago? No, I'm gonna stay home and watch something else. The play. There's basketball going on, hockey. Why am I gonna trek myself out to the cold in Chicago to watch my Cubs, who are all whatever the case may be, the White Sox who are horrible.
yeah, but
But
look, we
yeah, I like
both,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we both have the season starting in May. You know, like we said, all those cold cities that don't get warmer weather till way later. This is an advantage for them as well. You know, think about it. You know, the fan base doesn't show up to these stadiums early on in the season because they already know, and if they have done it in the past, they won't do it again because it's brutal. I've been to City Field in April. And guess what? You have to bring your coat, all right? Because the stadium is always 20 degrees colder than it is outside. All right.
yep,
So imagine, let's say you get a cold day like, like a April 24th, right? Where it's still cold out there and it's like 40 degrees. So you get into the stadium, now we're talking about 20s. These players aren't comfortable. They can't give you their all. Pitching is horrible because these guys are on the mound. They're freezing their asses off, and it's not the same. They call it the summer classic for a reason, right? So let's make it happen. Let's make it happen for all you owners out there listening. But
Oh, I
it's
have
never
one
gonna
more
happen.
solution too, right? As far as determine, every year they pick who gets the All Star game. So
Yes.
who gets to represent? Who gets
Who
to hold the All
host?
Star
Yeah.
game? Host the All
Hmm.
Star game for the weekend. So what I would also do, whoever finished with the best record, whoever whoever won the World Series, the following year gets also the home field, gets the All Star game at home. So if the New York Mets won the World Series, the following year the All Star game is played at City Field.
That would be horrible. I think. You know why? Because there's a lot of
Why?
teams. Because a lot of teams that always come back. All right, for the last couple of years, we haven't had repeat offenders. You're right about that. There hasn't been like a repeat offender that won the championship multiple times in a row. But let's go back. Like imagine when the Yankees won. You know what? They won 3 in a row, 4 in a row, something crazy like that, right? Did they do that? I'm not 100% sure, but I remember them being, up there multiple times in a row. But you're right. For the last couple of years, it's been different. It hasn't been the same, repeat offender winning the World Series back to back to back. We haven't seen that in a very long time. So okay, so that makes sense. That makes sense. But at the same time, all these, bottom barrel, bottom feeders will never get a chance to host. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe you
that's
could,
true. Good
you
point.
know,
You gotta give
that's
everybody
the
a
that
fair chance.
you gotta give everybody a fair chance. So that doesn't give everybody a fair chance because everybody has different type of pockets. Some pockets are deeper than others, and you build a team that can definitely make it to the postseason no matter what, due to how much money you spent. So I'm frowning on that one. But we can do we can just run down the list, you know what I'm saying? We can go from division to division and we can say the Mets hosted. Well, guess what? The Mets can't host again until everybody else got a shot. You know what I'm saying? So every year it'll change and it'll be a different team. There's 30 teams. So the Mets did it in the year 2000, then they can't do it again till the year 2031 or 2030. You know what I'm saying? Because it's
29 other
every
teams.
yeah, exactly 29 of the teams. So you get a shot to do it like that. So everybody, even though your team sucks, gets a chance to see all the stars together in on one field. Enjoying each other and having fun. Versus making that game count. As home field advantage in the World Series because we're gonna be using the spring training classic to the spring training tourney to decide who gets home field advantage in the World Series. But man, that when I was writing up the proposal, I was thinking to myself, oh my god, this sounds so much. It sounds like fun. But it's never gonna happen. At least we still have the baseball classic every 4 years. And that's always fun to watch. I like it. I like the structure and I think it's fun for the fans and it's fun to root for your country and to root for your players. So but I would like to see that implemented into the MLB as well. It's like a little short tourney prior to the season. Not only does it give the players time to develop their skills, it's it's a good fun time. But we're coming to the end of the show. I enjoyed talking to you about these proposals, and that was really really fun. It was one of my favorite episodes as of yet. I think that we came through with some really good information, and I enjoyed myself today.
No, that was fun. It's interesting. We both came up with really cool ideas to make the season uh, even more interesting with less games, and that's the ultimate goal. Because people would say, well, if you take away more games, how the storylines might change. It might not be as exciting and all that. But with this proposal, I think it makes it more intense, makes it harder, makes you teams really have to try their best, eh, to make the season whatever it becomes. So yeah, I like your proposal is great, and I highly doubt it. I guarantee we'll see more games added on than we will less games added on. I
That's
could
horrible.
guarantee you
That
that.
is horrible. That's horrible. So we're gonna have these players playing with coats. I don't know. Like I said, the East Coast has it the worst. All right, granted, if you're in LA, yeah, the weather's always beautiful, and you guys can play your hearts out. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why these clubs end up, on top of the division early on because it's easier to play there than it is on the East Coast. So something has to give, all right. So if you're putting domes on every single stadium out there, 30 domes, it's gonna take away from the game as well. You know what I'm saying? Because there's nothing better than going on a Sunday afternoon, a 1 o'clock game, and that sun is shining and hitting you nice and hard, and seeing these players on the field, seeing the sun shining. A dome it takes away from that. I don't know. I don't know. Something about being out there in the sun and enjoying a nice little game. I don't know, but
Yeah, well, I
definitely a great
disagree,
episode.
but I disagree because by having a dome, you can open up domes. They do it in Seattle, they do it in Miami. So I
Yeah, but
understand what you mean. It's not the same feeling, but you would get rid of rain delays. You would get rid of, rescheduling games and reshuffling and, seasons extended because they had to make up a game that was supposed to be played in in May. You know what I mean? Now they're making up in September. You know, it's kind of
Yeah,
silly, but
I see what you're saying too. I see what you're saying. But I'm glad you guys are out there supporting, and we're gonna try to keep them coming. All right, you guys have a good night.
sounds good, man. Good stuff, man. I'll see you later.
See you later, brother.